This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Shaun Cole, but today's star really doesn't need much of an introduction if you're in the sim racing world, and that's Ray Alfalla. Ray, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Hey, Shaun, thanks for having me.
We're going to have some fun talking about things, but if you don't know, Ray is now the three-time champion of the NASCAR iRacing NASCAR series, and that is a huge accomplishment. This is a guy who's actually made a small fortune from sim racing. So, Ray, again, thank you for joining us today. Let's just start off. Three-time champion in what, in my opinion, is one of the hardest ranks of racing. I'm not going to say the hardest ranks of sim racing, but what's it like being a three-time champion?
Man, it's pretty surreal just thinking about, watching my mentor, Richard Towler, on stage in 2010. I went down to Homestead and saw him up there and just wishing I could have the chance to win one of those things. And now 6 years later, there's three of them. Just thankful to the people that surround me on Slip Angle Motorsports and all the people that have helped me get to this point. And, it sounds cliche, but I'm looking towards the future already.
Awesome. Well, that's what most champion-type mentality people are all about. You mentioned Richard Towler, and with you being a three-time champion, I mean, for years I've covered sim racing, been around a long time, and Gregor Hutu is the obvious go-to when someone thinks of an alien driver, the best in the world. I honestly would put you right there. I mean, if you had an oval versus road, but I mean, at this point, I would put you at that rank of being like the best sim racer in the entire world. When you go to defend your fourth championship, do you feel that way? Do you feel the odds are against you? Or do you feel that, that's what it's like being a Gregor Hutu, a Ray Alfalla, a supreme alien driver?
Yeah, well, first, thanks, to be mentioned with Gregor. Gregor's the man, I'm forever a fan of Gregor. As far as the championship, I think there's a lot less pressure now. I think there was a lot of pressure on the third championship because I had finished second each of the last 3 years. So it was almost just a please don't finish second again kind of thing. And I also hadn't won a championship since 2012, which, I mean, it's not long ago, but it kind of, you have to stay relevant almost, and people start thinking, well, you won a championship 4 years ago, the series is more competitive now, or it's different now, or you can't do it anymore, or the car is different, you can't adapt. So I wanted to get this one really bad. So now for next year, I think the pressure's off. I'll be going forward and still putting in the effort, but it won't be as there won't be as much desperation, I guess, as this year, which It could help me. It could help me. It could hurt me. We'll see.
What do you think the big key to success was last season?
Well, first of all, we had a lot of help from Inex Racing at the beginning of the season. We worked together for most of the season, right up until the end. PJ Sturgis, who I raced against, basically for the championship, right up until the end, he was a big help, and we all just tested. We tested together. Shared basically all the notes, and at this level, it comes down to, and I always joke around about how excited I get when I pick up 100th or two. We will do 20 or 30 lap runs, and we'll add up the entire, lap times over the whole run, and then if you can just pick up a couple tenths over those 30 laps, it's like a big moment, and that's basically what the whole season comes down to. Is just running laps and putting the numbers in and see how fast you go, and just try to be as consistent as possible. And of course, you have to have things go your way. You can't have a computer failure. I didn't have any of those. You can't have the internet go down. You can't have lightning strike your house like I did 4 years ago before the Michigan race. It cost me to miss that one. So yeah, you got to have luck on your side. You got to do your job on the track. You got to have fast cars. It's very, a lot of things have to come together in order to win a championship.
Absolutely. I heard you mention a few times we and they and the guys that really helped you along the way. I mean, is it the kind of thing, is it that competitive that you need an entire team behind you to even have a shot at it? Or is it something that somebody solo could really make a strong run?
It helps to have more people. It just helps trying different things on the setup. You can do it alone, it would just take it takes a lot longer. There are pros and cons. Those guys that kind of work by themselves, if they can find something in the setup, then they're the only ones that have it. But then again, it's more difficult to find something as opposed to if you have 5 or 6 people working on different things. Obviously, the negatives to that is if they find it, then all of a sudden you have 5 or 6 guys with the same setup, and it kind of just goes like it happens. The series, nothing stays secret for too long. People talk. People, even if it's just out of pride, they say, "Hey, I went this fast. Look how fast I can go." And the other guy's like, "Oh, really? You went that fast? Okay, now I know how fast to go." So, the setup, even though it's open setup, there's so much leaking of information, intentionally or not or unintentionally, that it almost becomes a fixed setup series with a little bit of adjustment here and there.
Right. Okay. Now, who did you have like a biggest rivalry in? Maybe not just this season, but is there anybody out there in sim racing who you're just like constantly, that's the guy?
Oh, I don't know. It differs. I finished second the last 3 years, and it was to somebody different every single season. It was like I was the guy stuck in second place, and it was just a revolving door of who would beat me. So I wouldn't. I mean, just this year it was PJ, who was the main rival, and it was kind of crazy how we were just always together on the track. And in the championship race, we finished first and second. Like I swear, it's not rigged, even though it looks that way. Um, but no, I don't really single out one name. I can probably give you maybe a list of 5 or 10 guys who are always kind of up front. But over the years, I've had several different rivalries, and uh, not many uh, not many negative rivalries as far as getting into on track altercations and things like that. Which I think it's important, just staying out of trouble. And I always try to race people really clean and really, but I always try to be as aggressive as possible. It's a fine line. It's aggressive, and putting somebody in the wall is very, very, very close. And you have to push the limits in order to get anywhere in racing. But I think I've got that balance pretty well now at this point in my career.
So during the season, did you have any moments that you kind of wish you could take back?
Um, Actually, there weren't too many moments this season. I remember being really angry at Charlotte because I messed up on the last restart and I finished third instead of second. So that's the kind of year it was, where there were no big disasters. I think the worst finish was 14th, and that's because we got trapped a lap down by a yellow. So my goal every year is to finish top 10 in every single race, and this year just came one race short. So that goal is still there for next season. Um, and obviously, the championship is always the main goal, but I always set these small little goals for myself that I've always had. And I feel like if you can finish in the top 10 in every single race in the year, you're, if not guaranteed a championship, you're almost guaranteed to go into the final race with a shot. So that's definitely my goal. Always is. But yeah, no big moments this year as far as super disappointment or the race I finished outside the top 10, unfortunately, was in the last 4 races, so I couldn't drop it. So that was a down moment of the year. But there's not much time to stay down in the series. You have to, eventually the team are like, all right, we got to get back on the horse. And the next race, we got to start testing and practicing, and we have to forget the last one.
Absolutely. So how much time goes into testing each week?
Testing, I would say at least 10 hours over the couple week period. But it can probably be more than that, just because I like spreading it out. But then at the end, I'll probably do, I'll do kind of like the most laps closer to the race, and it's mostly just to get the muscle memory down. You don't want any surprises when you start racing. You don't want anything to happen that didn't happen in testing, or that you're not used to. And I think that's how that's how we're able to race so close to people and do these things on the track, is because we've done this in testing so many times that when we're doing it in the race, we're not even thinking about it. And I think that's the important part.
So when you're talking about that, what are you talking, like fuel strategy, restarts, when you're going to pit, emergency pitting or unscheduled pitting, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, with Slip Angle Motorsports, we'll test. We'll do like a restart on old tires, or okay, somebody go and take two. Somebody be that guy that stays out on 20 lap tires, see what happens. Um, or we'll be doing a run with a group of cars, and we'll say, okay, everybody just pit now, see what happens, and just think different things, and practice racing side by side and three wide, and um, just cover all the basics, all the stuff that you would have in a race. Have one person designated as the driver that dive bombs everyone, and just so you're ready for that, or have somebody with damage out there kind of in the way without trying to, and get around that person around the track. So just a bunch of different variables that you'll face on the track, and if you can practice that, then once it'll get there, you're not surprised about it anymore.
So when it comes down to, I mean, like, I think there are some people who, before a big race, they're panicking, and I think there are other guys who are so calm they can drive with one hand, type with the other. Where do you fall in that range?
Well, I have music blasting pretty much for all test sessions. Everything right up until like 30 minutes before qualifying is when I kind of shut everything off, and I just do a few qualifying runs. But I like to keep things pretty light. Whenever things start getting too serious, I usually just make some sort of ridiculous joke just to get everybody off of that, because you don't want to put too much pressure on yourself. There's already so much pressure behind it. Um, the whole racing for $10,000 and thousands of people watching, and all this other stuff, that you have to at least have fun while you're testing and while you're doing all this, and so I try to keep it pretty lighthearted.
I can see that from you. So I see the big giant check. Actually, I see multiple checks on the wall, the giant checks, which that's awesome. You almost have enough of those to build a house at this point. What's it like walking on that stage in front of, you say thousands, we're talking 100,000 people, and being announced a genuine NASCAR champion? What is that feeling? I mean, that's a feeling that very few people get an opportunity to feel.
Yeah, it's surreal. I went to my first ever NASCAR race at Homestead in 2005, and I actually got to watch my childhood hero Rusty Wallace run his last race. So I was, just thinking about just being there as a 16-year-old watching a race from the stands, and have never been, on the infield, never had any dreams that I could be in there one day, or much not like on stage and receiving some sort of prize in front of everyone. Um, but funny enough, right before the stage, we were kind of stressing out because Clint hadn't shown up. He showed up like 30 seconds to go, so we're just calling Clint over, "Hey, get over here!" And then we're wondering, because there's a video that plays on the big screen. We're wondering, is the video going to play before we go up there, or is it going to be afterwards? So there's kind of all these things are happening at once, and you're told to go up there at a very specific time. It's not like 2 o'clock, or it was like 1:53. You're supposed to be on stage, and there's just a revolving door of people that come in and out. So you're kind of all busy and all these things, and then I had teammates and family and friends in the crowd, and they were kind of all over the place. And when I walk up on stage, I don't see anyone at all. It's just a crowd of people, and I'm just kind of looking off into the distance, and it's all over really quickly. So I just try to enjoy the moment, try to like not drop the trophy or not do anything too stupid up there. But yeah, it's all over pretty quick, and then it's like, all right, that's 3 times now, so I don't know, it's just pretty cool.
That is awesome. That is awesome. That is so cool. So for me, when I meet, not meet, when I have friends that, I say I'm a sim racer, I get the, oh, you are such an uber geek. You know, I'm just this gamer geek, and very few of my friends even sim race. Now, I know a lot of your friends, closest friends, actually are sim racers like Brian Blackford and whatnot. But when you introduce yourself as a sim racer, do you also then get to say, yeah, but I'm a NASCAR champion?
I kind of just go with the pro gaming kind of thing. It's become big enough to where uh, people know what pro gaming is, and essentially that's what we're doing. We're professionally racing a sim game for money. So I just say, a pro gamer, and then if they ask more, I'll tell them more about it, or I'll even, if they're like a close friend or something, I'll bring them over and try the rig. And they usually, when they sit here and they try this, they've usually never seen like a triple screen setup. So they're like, what in the world is this? I thought computers only had one screen, and why do you have a steering wheel on your desk? And all these things. And then they try it and they're just blown away at this whole new world of like, wow, you're sitting here but you're like in another world. So most people are totally amazed by it. And not to mention, I want to give them like a link to watch a race broadcast or something, and they first click it and they're like, wait, this is like not real life, this is it's broadcasters and drama and money and all that. So it's pretty cool.
So now when I think there are certain prizes, like when I think of Gran Turismo Academy, that they, instead of getting money, they get opportunities. Glenn McGee, even with like the Mazda championship, he didn't directly get cash so that he could go buy whatever he wanted with, but he got an opportunity. Now, you're a three-time champion, and every sim racer who's ever gotten an opportunity has come out looking wonderfully. Has this led to any opportunities for you yet in real life to get a chance to drive or a chance to show what you can do in real life?
No, not quite. I did a Miata test a few years ago, and that was mostly through a help of Breathless Performance and Lisa Pineda, who owns Slip Angle Motorsports. But I'm still hopeful that it'll lead to opportunities on the NASCAR side. I know on the road they've had a lot of competitions like the Mazda competition, and Wyatt Gooden did a thing with Volkswagen a few years ago. He got something out of that, but we haven't quite gotten the same thing on the oval side as far as there being some sort of combine. Peak did a thing a few years ago, actually, which I ironically finished second in, so I couldn't go. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping, with sim racing and gaming in general and esports kind of becoming more and more popular, I'm hoping that team owners will realize that there's a lot of untapped potential in sim racing. People that just don't have the money to go racing in the real world, but they have the skills to do it. They have the knowledge, and I'm always amazed by how knowledgeable sim racers are, and especially at the top levels. Where we may be racing virtually, but everything we deal with in a race is absolutely real. And you kind of always know when somebody sim races by how they watch a race and how they comment it, because we've kind of been in that situation, so we know what's going to happen. And so yeah, I'm always looking for real world opportunities and real world and sponsorship, but as you know, that's very difficult to come by, and you need a lot of resources just to get started in racing, not to mention get up to the higher levels.
Yeah, well, it really takes someone taking a chance, and in my opinion, it's not even a big chance when you really, like you mentioned, sim racers, in my opinion, come into the real ranks more educated than today's normal racer, and this is going to sound terrible, but most normal racers come in so wealthy that there's no need for them to learn every aspect, because they're usually provided with a tuner, a crew chief, and everything they need tools-wise to excel as a driver. But it's
right. Well, it's also the more funding you have, the more mistakes you're allowed to make out on the track without really any repercussions. And there's some guys that they're kind of clueless coming into racing. They spend a couple years crashing cars, and by year number 3, they're pretty good because they've had the seat time and the track time, and they have the money to keep building those cars to where you see some drivers come in and they have limited funding. They make a couple mistakes, they run out of money, and they're out the door.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think sim racers understand protecting their equipment that much better as well.
Yeah, and the cool thing about sim racing is that it's so affordable when you compare it to real life. It's you kind of your computer doesn't need a change of tires every time, or you may upgrade your stuff on your computer every few years, but it's way more affordable. And in my opinion, like you said, it's so competitive because you don't need that huge backing. Just about anybody can jump on here, and if they're good enough, they're gonna make it to the top series. You don't need a huge sponsor backing you. You don't need all these things to come together in order to make it to the series. You show up to the track, you learn the setups, you learn how to drive the car, and you're there if you're good enough.
So I know everyone out there will kill me if I don't ask you this. So what's your setup? What kind of wheel? What kind of pedals? What do you use?
Yeah, well, I'm using triple screens and G27 right now. I've tried many different wheels, and I started off with a DFGT. That's the first 2 championships. Then I went a little fancy and tried a few more expensive wheels, and I realized that I wasn't picking up any speed. And some of those wheels are actually they're made to be so realistic that they might actually hurt your speed a little bit because they're heavier and they feel great, but all I care about is lap time. And in the end, all I care about is lap time. So I ended up going back to G27, and that's what I've been using. The having a stable seat is very important. Obviously, you don't want your seat to be moving around and whatnot. But if people ask me what the most important thing I've ever invested in for sim racing, it's absolutely the triple screens. It just doesn't beat. You don't want to be out there racing like this, racing with blinders on. It's a totally different world, but you can see where you're going. You can see when there's a car to your left or to your right. And if people are always asking, what should I get? Should I get a wheel or a seat or a sound system or a monitor, or should I get this huge monitor, single screen? No, it's always triple screen. Now we're starting to get into VR, but in my opinion, that's not ready yet. That's not really. I would go there maybe in a few years, just when they start getting more and more advanced, and then second and third versions of it. But right now, I would say triple screens. No matter what size of the monitors, triple screens will be better than any single screen.
I agree completely. And I want to thank you, because I say it all the time, and I don't know if people actually believe me, but I'm like, the G27 is still the wheel. I mean, as much as I love all of the better, and I say better in terms of more refined, more expensive, more realism even, like you said, but the G27 is all you need. And in the case for you, it is a world championship level wheel. And I say that often as well.
Yeah, and even the DFGT, it's I think $120 something, and that wheel is just fine. And that's kind of what I was referring to earlier with how affordable sim racing is. Normally in the real world, you see something that for real life racing, you see something that costs $100 versus something that costs $1,000. You're probably going to go faster with the $1,000 equipment, where it may not be the case for sim racing. Now, that's not to say that obviously, if you can afford a really expensive wheel, that's really nice, but don't necessarily expect to pick up any time with it. You might pick up enjoyment, especially with the new direct drive wheels, which I only have limited experience. I've only tried it at a few different events, and those are pretty cool. I have not owned one. But as far as picking up speed, I don't see how. I mean, it's possible, obviously, that wheels can be made better, obviously, than the G27. But right now, I think if you're thinking that you're missing out on something because you can only afford a G27 or a DFGT or like $100 to $200 wheel, no, you can go just as fast with those wheels as any other wheel in the market.
Agree. So it is the off season right now. What do you do with your spare time? I mean, you're saving a lot of time not having to be competing each week right now. What do you do for fun?
Well, I'm kind of just taking a break right now. I'm actually crew chiefing for Bobby Zelensky. He's a development driver on Slip Angle Motorsports. He's driving for the development team, Brian Blackford Racing, and he's coming up through the ranks. And we're trying to get a few of those drivers up to the Peak Series next year. And Bobby's actually leading the Pro Series points at this point. So I spend most of the time just being late up on the pit box for those races because after 8 months of testing and doing runs and trying to calculate lap times and picking up 100th here and 100th there, kind of the last thing I want to do after the season's over is sim race. So I'll watch it. I'll watch it. I won't get on the track much. But it's mostly just relaxing and staying fit, staying in shape, just getting your mind off of things and watching the Pro Series because that's very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have any other kind of hobbies, or is this just your number one hobby in life?
Yeah, well, it's mostly sim racing. Like I said, working out has kind of become a thing recently where I really enjoy the time at the gym. I've played baseball, so I do kind of like that on and off. I'll go to the park with my dad and play some catch or some batting practice here and there. I enjoy karting. There's no kart tracks really close to me. Usually whenever I visit Brian Blackford and Lisa Pineda up in St. Petersburg, we usually go karting up there. Or we would also go karting down in Miami and Homestead. We have the Slip Angle Motorsports crew down there. That was also a fun time. But yeah, close to me we have like $10 or 10 mile per hour carts where you go wide open around a road course if you want to mess around. But yeah, it's mostly for me the off season is just kind of relaxing and getting ready for the next year and always staying ready physically for any real world chances because that's definitely my dream and it's definitely something I want to be ready for when the opportunity arises.
Well, and that's a good thing because it seems to be that always ends up being one of the criteria when it really comes down to it. When the opportunity comes, you look at the GT Academy and it's like, no, physical became, at least a third of the overall measuring and when they were picking drivers. So, well, that's good. That's good. So, you already mentioned your small goal for next season, of having all top 10s. Any other secondary goals coming into next year?
Well, this year, I guess more wins. I PJ got 5 wins and I got 2. So it's one of those things where, yeah, you can win the championship obviously without winning a race. But you always want at least to win, just to say you got to win. And this was actually, even though it was the best season, it was the fewest wins I've ever had in a championship winning season. So, it's just kind of little small things. It'd be nice to just click off different wins here and there. But, we had a lot of top 2s and top 3s. And that's what ended up basically winning the championship was avoiding catastrophe.
And having consistency.
Right. And it was, like you asked earlier, any really big disappointing moments. Not really, when you're really angry and losing sleep because you finished third instead of second, it's a pretty good season.
Absolutely. All right, before I let you go, last opportunity. Anybody out there you want to thank? Anybody out there who is really behind you and makes this happen for you?
Yeah, well, again, everybody on Slip Angle Motorsports, teammates Chris Overland, Brian Blackford, Lisa for the team owner and the leadership, and Stephanie Lessentine, she was up on the pit box, does a lot helping with my adjustments and spotting. Bobby Zelensky and Kyle Putz came in at the end also to give her a hand, and they all helped out. And check out alfallatech.com if you're looking for a gaming computer, or contact me online and we'll work something out. And also, Wendell Scott Foundation, they do a lot to help underprivileged kids do something and then do something productive. STEM X, Snowcone Productions, Brian Blackford's company with photography and video and whatnot. And of course, thank iRacing and Peak and NASCAR for putting all this together. It's pretty crazy that we're in a position to where we're racing for $10,000, and I look forward to the future with esports becoming even bigger. We should start seeing bigger prize money or just bigger stakes, and maybe it'll lead to this becoming like a even bigger thing that it is right now. And who knows, maybe even into more of a real world farm system than it has been. So yeah, thanks to everyone. And I can't forget my parents, which I've always mentioned they're my biggest fans, and I'm happy and thankful that iRacing got them the hot passes and the sweet passes at Homestead. They had a great time. My dad was telling me just last week that he was already missing being up on the suite, so I better win next year again. So, so the pressure's on. So thanks to everyone, and thanks to Simpit, thanks to you for having me on. I always enjoy these and kind of letting people into my world, even though it's not too different from a typical sim racer. I'm just trying to go as fast as possible out there, and the most basic thing, how do you go fast? Well, you try to go as fast as you can without crashing, and that's about it.
One more thing, you mentioned a few things there, but people think of you as this great oval racer, which of course you are. I've raced against you on the road in the British touring car, and actually I was talking to Kip Stevens. He says hello. You're a really good road racer as well. You ever have any thoughts of going after a roadside championship?
Well, I was in the World Championship, the Formula One side, for the first couple of years, and then it just got to the point where I had to pick a side because it was just too much. It was dealing with college and these two series and an attempt at a social life with those two series. It was just too much. And then I showed up in 2012. I think I didn't have much time to put in much practice for the first race, and I showed up. It was at Spa, I remember. I showed up. I qualified last by about like a second or two. I was like, well, that's it. We're done. Didn't really have like a team or anything to race with over there. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to focus on the oval side. And well, it's turned out pretty well. But yeah, I mean, I do love road racing. I follow Formula One. I watch every single race. I watch IndyCar. I watch NASCAR. I love racing in general, no matter what kind it is. So yeah, big props to those guys. I think Martin Kroenke got the championship this year. That was a big battle. I told him anytime you can beat Gregor at anything, it's like a huge deal. And also the blank paint series, that's enjoyable to watch. But yeah, I just love racing. I love racing, real world, virtual, oval, road, whatever it is. I love to go racing.
Absolutely. All right, last question, and this is just sort of the evolution of our sport. How has the level of competition changed over the years? You've been doing this a while, 3 championships and all. Has it always been the same? Has it always been the same at the top? Is it getting harder? Is it getting easier to be dominant?
That's a good question. I think people say that it's gotten more competitive, but at the same time, we used to have a lot of big names back when the series first started. The Richard Thaler, Derek Wood, Chris Shearburn, who's actually in the Pro Series trying to make a comeback this year. Guys like John Prather, Bob Bryant. I'm trying to think of names that used to race back in the 2K3 days in DMP. John Gorlinski, who's also, I believe, trying to come back. And I'm probably forgetting like big names, but there were a lot of big names that raced back, 7, 8, 9 years ago that don't race anymore now. But of course, they've been replaced by other fast drivers. So I wouldn't say that it's harder now. But it is. I feel like maybe the series as a whole is more complete. I wouldn't say at the front it's much different, but there's more depth in the field. So it's, if you were running 20th maybe 6 years ago, you might be running 30th now because it's just becoming more competitive throughout the whole field. And And the bigger this thing becomes, the more effort the guys are going to be putting in. You have these massive teams where guys are putting in laps, and everybody's just within a few hundredths of a second. So it takes a lot of effort, a lot of close attention to detail in order to get anywhere in this series, in the real world. It just takes effort if you want to be at a high level and competitive. So I don't know, the level of competition, it changes every year. Some people say it's harder, some people say it's easier. I think it's about the same up front. It's harder in the mid pack and in the rear. But overall, I think it's definitely not getting any easier to win one of these. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. Very cool. Well, Ray, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for letting us into your world a little bit and learn about you and what it takes to be a 3-time champion. And I and many people out there will be rooting for you next season.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Shaun. And next year we go for 4.
Absolutely. Very cool. So there you have it. Ray Alfalla, 3-time, on his way to maybe being a 4-time champion. It was a pleasure hearing everything from him today. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.